Good evening, everybody. I'll just leave it another couple of seconds, obviously, when people are still arriving. But those of you that are already here, I thought you might like to meet somebody. So this is my chicken Dottie, and she's a little bit challenged. She's actually got nerve damage in her leg, so she can't be with her flock. So she has to be inside as a house chicken now.
Does she poo everywhere?
Sorry?
Does she poo in your house?
No, she's most of the time, because she's got nerve damage in her leg, she sort of sits in a little enclosure and she's quite happy in there. Oh. But this is Dottie, and she's very sweet and very friendly, as you can see. So I thought I'll show everybody my beautiful chicken, because isn't she pretty? Look how pretty she is. Isn't she lovely? All right, Dottie, you can go into your box now. I just thought I'll show them a chicken. That'll make them happy. There you go. Bye-bye, Dottie. Good girl. All right. Bit of amusement for the evening. All righty. So last bit of brain work last bit of brain work on the brain before we jump to the brain work on the everything else. How is everybody? Good?
Yep.
Reasonable week? Yeah. Are we okay? I think the last part of this topic's easier than the first, like the neurons and the ions and things moving all over the place and action potentials. That's a bit, but when it comes to just lobes and what's going on there, it's a bit more just mapping it out, isn't it? It's not too bad. All right. Let me, without further ado, you know what I should do before I do anything else is put the document back into the chat again, just in case. So give me 2 seconds. And I'll apologize for my not particularly professional sartorial attire. It is a charming 5 degrees, so it is hoodie on. That's that, right? It just has to happen. Otherwise I will die of frost exposure or something. Okay, let us get a move on. Where are we? There it is. Okay. So last part of the brain. Oh, Steph, sorry. Yep.
Hey, I am. What are we doing? Still on like the nervous system? Are we? I'm a bit.
We're on the last part. Yeah, we're on the brain cortexes and I shouldn't say cortexes. That's incorrect. Cortices, autonomic nervous system, hearing and vision, the special senses, and then next week we're on blood types. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, and what did we do last week? Because I missed both sessions. Were we doing toots last week? Yep. And we did nervous system. So, you know, all the stuff that we did before the break. Yeah. That was, so we went over that stuff again. So we went over the neurons and the potassium and the ions and the sodium and the movement and the myelin sheaths and the action potentials and all that kind of thing. Okay, so I haven't missed a tutorial sheet. Because like I seen the 6 and I was like, I've already got 5. I thought I had missed 6. Yeah, no, I just revised it again because I wanted to do it before your mini test, and I wanted to do it on the spot. But as it turns out, I wasn't supposed to do it until after the break. So what you got was like a double tutorial on the same material. So that's my fault. That works for me. Okay, good. Yeah, so you haven't missed anything. You're all on track. Everything's fine. Okay, now I did want to say with this one, guys, there is a lot I have to say. So if we jump to our learning objectives, there are tons, to put it mildly, and a lot of it is not list. A lot of it is describe and explain. So they're really expecting, we are really expecting a very good knowledge level on this particular topic, mainly because it's a central system and it really does relate to everything. So as you can see, there's tons in there. Today, we're mainly looking at just this first page. So the meninges and the landmarks and the ventricles, the various different areas and what they do, and the autonomic nervous system and its 2 parts, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, just so that we've got that clear. And then I will do a little bit more on the middle ear and stuff at the end of this tutorial. Sight and hearing, both very important, obviously. You can concentrate specifically on hearing because that'd be fun, I think. having had a look at what's expected of you. But pretty important to make sure that you're across all of that. And I know it's an awful lot to get smashed into like a week, but it is what it is. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump and revise and see how much you picked up from last week's activities. So number one, what is not one of the brain's 4 major regions? So now you've got to compartmentalize it and go, what's a major region and what isn't? Or if you're my brain, you knock out all the ones that are, and then you're left with something left over at the end. Yeah. So is the brainstem a major region? Everybody should be nodding at me right now. Yeah. We know the cerebellum's a major region. Little cauliflower at the back. Yep. The cerebrum, that's the whole freaking thing. That's a major region. The diencephalon. So you're left with those two, aren't you? The ventral ramus and the diencephalon. That would be the thing you're flipping between. What are we going to settle on, B or C?
B.
B? I would settle on that, yeah. That would be the answer, ventral ramus. So that is not a major, it is a brain region, it is not a major brain region. Right? So we separate the brain into major regions and then into minor regions and then into even more minor regions. And so when we're starting to talk about details like the ventral ramus, we're really talking about a very, very specific section like the hypothalamus or like the pineal gland, or it's extremely, I was going to say Pacific. It's nothing to do with an ocean. Sorry. Okay. So speaking of which, now that we've talked about the diencephalon for 2 seconds, but the thalamus and the hypothalamus might constitute something that sounds a bit like that. I just gave you the answer. God. So it's a region. The diencephalon is a region that contains the thalamus and the hypothalamus. I can't believe I just gave the answer. I won't do it on the next page anyway. Sorry. I get ahead of myself. My brain is tricky. All right. Which part of the autonomic nervous system gets us all in a tizzy when we're in rage or fear or something? Which one?
The sympathetic.
The sympathetic. Agreement? Yes. Yes, absolutely. The fight or flight system. And it's so much fun, that one. Okay. Does somebody want to tell me what they understand while we're at it? What they understand the sympathetic nervous system to be for? Imagine that you're describing it to a sort of 5th, 6th grade student. What is this sympathetic nervous system? What is it all about? Are you talking to me, Emily, or someone else?
You don't want to know what I just said.
Okay. I probably do, because if it's like inappropriate, then we'll all remember it. However, it is recorded, so there's that too, right?
I don't know. I'm so far behind right now.
Oh, okay, all right. Anybody who's a little bit more on, let's help Emily out. Sympathetic nervous system as described to a 10-year-old kid.
I'll have a go.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'd say, imagine a tiger goes for you, and what do? So
nice.
You either want to run away or you freeze, and you'll be really alert, and your heart will be beating, and your blood will be flowing, and your legs are ready to run or fight.
Perfect. Exactly. So when you think of the sympathetic nervous system, sometimes it's just the terminology is a bit annoying, but the sympathetic nervous system is sympathetic to you staying alive when you're being chased by a mastodon or a tiger, or, name it, the toothed thing that wants to eat you and destroy you. So everything that goes on with that sympathetic nervous system is about you running away real fast or being able to fight it real fast. I would choose run away, but, you might want to fight the mastodon if you are that way inclined. So that's what the sympathetic. The parasympathetic, on the other hand, is what's the colloquial phrase that we use for the parasympathetic? If sympathetic's fight or flight, Parasympathetic is?
Rest and digest.
Rest and digest. Yes. It's got another angle too, just to again take it back to things that you can remember. Your reproductive systems and desires therein are to do with the parasympathetic division largely, right? Because technically you're not supposed to want to stop and have a bit of nookie while you're being chased by the tiger either, right? Because you know, other things on your mind, like the, you know, surviving the day, except for the male arousal mechanisms, which are actually sympathetic. So nearly everything is parasympathetic except the male arousal mechanisms. So that's rather interesting to ponder on a philosophical point of view.
Work, because I know that patients can have erections when they've got spinal cord injuries. How does that relate?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's essentially just a nerve stimulation situation there with the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system doing most of the work for desire and for your brain and for relaxation, for production of oxytocin and all of the connection hormones. But the actual erection mechanism is completely parasympathetic. So basically, it's urgent. It's incredibly urgent that this happens. And your body doesn't understand that. Even if you've got a spinal cord injury or what have you, it is urgent for the species to continue. Stephanie.
Just to go back a little bit
Sure.
to the sympathetic, did you say like males are like theirs isn't as what did you say about that bit? Like, did you say something about like males having a lower sense of like the fight or flight?
No, higher more than anything else.
Oh, it's heightened. Like,
yeah, it's yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's got to do with hormone production and what have you. There's a ton of different places to go there, but yeah, I find it very interesting that the parasympathetic division is rest and digest and procreate, except for the male arousal response, which is actually governed by everything's urgent and it has to happen right now. I'm sure you've all heard the metaphor of, like, you know, for a guy, it's like a fireman. He's got to go put out the fire like immediately. That's it. And it's a mega emergency. Whereas the girl, is actually the fire, slow burn before you get anywhere near mega blaze. So I don't know, just ways I'm trying to get you to remember things. I always go back to sex. It's a bit of a problem. Okay, but you know, that's how I remember stuff. Okay, anywho, there's plenty to remember about it, but basically just go with, you're not going to be asked about the male sexual response. I so threw that in there. What you will possibly be asked about is what physiological effects do these different things have. So for instance, if we're in the middle of a sympathetic division dominance, so we're frightened or we're hugely stressed about a situation, what is some of the systems that aren't going to be working for us at that particular point or will be massively slowed down? What do we not need when we're running away from a tiger?
You don't need to bother about digesting our food or making urine.
No, we really don't worry about digesting food. And we don't worry about making urine, definitely. We do worry about voiding it, though. So one of the things that the sympathetic nervous system will do is make you release that internal sphincter and void whatever's in your bladder. I assume it will help you run faster, but this was seen quite commonly with victims of hanging. So whenever they hung people, generally they would lose control of their bladder, not their bowel. Weirdly enough, that's actually not innovated, but the bladder, it's actually kind of programmed to release with the sympathetic nervous system. So makes you lighter, I guess, to run. Also leaves a trail for the tiger to follow. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, moving on. We can do that all night, but hopefully you got a reasonable idea of what's going on with the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay. When we talk about so now we're jumping straight into balance and hearing. So the hair cells in the organ of Corti, if they are damaged, what does this result in a loss of with us? So don't try and remember where the organ of Corti is and what it's got to do with. You can look it up, by the way. You don't have to just pull this out of your brain. This is, it's an open book test, so please feel free to look it up.
Is it D?
No.
Could it be?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Good. Okay, it's tricky. The ear is very, very complicated. How many semicircular canals have you got in each ear? While we're talking about balance, yeah, 3 exactly. Has anyone actually tried messing with people's balance by spinning them around on chairs and doing the tests of balance and fluid in the semicircular canals? It's fun. You could do it to your kids. Literally have a look it up on the internet of the test you can do for the semicircular canal functions. And it's the whole idea of spinning people around in a chair that has a swivel, make sure they don't going to fall off, and then watching as their eyes try and rebalance their equilibrium as your semicircular canals are completely thrown out. It's lots of fun. So if you spin people on this axis, you stop them spinning, but their eyes keep going, because those fluids take a while, because fluid in motion doesn't stop all by itself. Right? It takes a while to actually stop. So, and you can change the angle of the head and change the response of the eyes to the fluid movement, which is a bit of fun. Okay, also dangerous, so be careful you do it the right way. Which layer of the eye has our photoreceptors, our rods and our cones?
The retina.
The retina, absolutely, yes. What is the sclera? Just the whites. Yep, so literally it's the jelly, essentially, not a whole heap going on there. The cornea, where's that? Front or back?
Front?
Yep. Okay, so and what's the cornea's function in the eye?
To emit light.
Yes, and to help focus the light onto the retina. Yep, so hopefully you can look at all these possibilities and kind of knock things out and go, it's definitely not here and it's definitely not there. What about the choroid plexus? Does anyone remember what the choroid plexus is? Also a hole in the retina. That's where your optic nerve comes through. So there's absolutely nothing there. There's no rods and cones going on at all. That is the exit and entrance point for your optic nerve, choroid plexus. Okay, moving, sounds like, you know what, sounds like you guys know brains and sympathetics and autonomic nervous systems okay, and it sounds like might need to do a little bit more revision on vision and hearing. It's usually the weakest part, so maybe have a concentrate on that. Okay. Now, the hormones that are released by the adrenal glands. Can anyone remember any of them? You don't have to remember all of them. If you could list them all off just like that, I'd be really impressed. But what hormones are released by the adrenal glands? Remembering that these respond to something produced by the hypothalamus usually. The hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis, and there's a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So it's all of these structures working together, something from the hypothalamus, something from the pituitary, and then something from the adrenals. What are the adrenals? Two places, medulla and cortex. Anyone got one example of what a hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands? There's a big one. It relates to what we were just talking about with fight or flight.
Adrenaline and noradrenaline.
Adrenaline and noradrenaline. Good. And that's fight or flight. Absolutely. Yep. What's the other name for adrenaline? There's annoyingly scientifically too many names for everything.
Epinephrine.
Epinephrine. Good. Excellent. Anybody else got any anything that comes out of our adrenals in response to our hypothalamus telling it what to do? Everyone's sitting there going, oh, that's really hard. And it is, it's true. But this question is it's a pretty important one, and it's part of the learning objectives, listing the hormones that are released by the adrenal gland. So this could easily show up. So make sure you've got this list written down, okay? So there they all are. Right, so we've got aldosterone and corticosteroids. We've got glucocorticoids. We've got androgens. That's pretty important. Estrogen, testosterone, right? Big load of them comes from our adrenal glands, and other parts come actually from our reproductive organs. Our catecholamines, which you just mentioned, epinephrine, norepinephrine, or the other terminology, whatever you choose to write is correct, plus a couple of different peptides. Right? So not only should you be able to broadly list, and I'm saying you don't need to remember their taxonomy. Okay, so if you can't remember mineralocorticoids and glucocorticoids, it doesn't matter. It is important that you're able to talk about the different hormones that are coming through. So aldosterone, cortisone, estrogen, testosterone, adrenalins, and your somatostatins. Even better if you can remember which part of the adrenal gland they're actually produced by, be it the cortex or the medulla. Not necessarily down to the zones, that's a bit much. Okay, but just cortex, which are the cortical hormones, which are the medullary hormones. To make it stick, try and figure out, or try and trace it through. Oh, my leg just went to sleep. What organs are they then going to affect? And you don't have to remember all, but for instance, if I ask you very simply, what organs do estrogen and testosterone target? Hopefully you can answer, right? Male sexual organs, female sexual organs. That's enough detail. We don't have to know every little thing. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline, what organ specifically does that target in, say, a sympathetic response? Natalie did mention it earlier, but not specifically in this particular frame. But what is one of the things that we need to have we're about to run away from our predator, what needs to go much faster and harder?
Our heart?
Yes. Good. I was a bit scared that when I said harder, everyone would go, malresponse. No, yes, the heart. Okay, so adrenaline, obviously one of the big things it does is it actually affects the heart and the heart rate, and making sure that we've got enough blood going around our system to actually run away. All righty, now, this one should be easy or hard. Define pain. We could be in philosophy land here for a long time. Remembering that we are in anatomy and physiology though. So we aren't actually looking for, define pain. Well, actually Yeats did this very well in 1873. Define pain in your terms, your words, obviously.
An unpleasant feeling.
An unpleasant feeling? Absolutely. Yep. What else? What else? How else can we define pain?
Sorry.
Physiologically as well, because remember we're in a nat and phys. So what would be the nursing definition of pain?
Is it like actual or potential?
That's it.
Damage?
Yes, actual or potential tissue damage. I love, and it's so grey. It's marvelous, isn't it? It can be actual pain, or it can just be maybe potentially I might be hurt here, so I feel pain anyway, which is kind of amazing, but also incredibly true, because psychosomatic pain is just as real as somatic pain. Okay, so here's our definition. This is the dictionary definition. Unpleasant, both sensory and emotional experience with actual or potential tissue damage, or described in terms of such damage. And of course, I put the SpongeBob thing over there because it's funny. We talk about a broken heart causing pain. And it's, again, that's, potential tissue damage. It's nothing to do with your actual heart, of course, but it's always related to potential tissue damage. So actual or potential. So interesting. Make sure that this is a very hard one to rewrite in your own words without kind of falling back on what's already there. So basically try and think of other ways to say unpleasant sensory and emotional experience. You're not going to get away with not mentioning sensory and emotional, I don't think, because there's only so many ways to say that. But there's plenty of different synonyms for unpleasant. Yeah. Actual or potential tissue damage. Just try not to do it word for word. Okay. Moving along from SpongeBob. Now, this is a tricksy one. Matching lobes of the cortex with their functional areas. Okay, so does everyone do the thing when you're trying to remember the brain lobes? Does everyone actually do this physically with their hands? Because it's really important. This makes you remember frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. Yep, do it. I'm serious. Do it with your hands because you will never ever forget frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, and just remember you've got a cauliflower at the bottom. Yep. All right. Now, they all have specific areas, and the proviso here that we have to really land on is none of these are contained. This is a very broad look at the brain. Okay, so for instance, there are broadly things do happen in specific lobes, but also they don't. There's different centers all over the place and systems that you don't need to get into. So for the moment, it's broad, but don't take it as a, I guess what I want to say, take it as a starting point for understanding the brain, and don't just sort of sit there and go, oh yeah, well, you know, the visual area is here. So, but it's also in lots of other directions as well. So good place to start though. All righty, so you've got a list on the right there, and you've got your different lobes there on the left, which we've just, you know, done a bit of charades with, which was nice. A bit of dancing on a Monday is a good thing. So let's try and figure it out. Frontal lobe, executive function. What's that responsible for on that right-hand list? I just realized I've written auditory twice. That was good, wasn't it? Just take E and F as a, that's, whoops, cat typo. Okay. Frontal lobe.
D.
Yep. Absolutely. What else? Anything else there from frontal? No. Let's go to parietal. What's our parietal lobe responsible for? Is this hard?
Is that A?
Yep. Touch, absolutely. Should I just skip to the bit where we can actually see the brain? Because it sounds like this might be causing a bit of tricky. Yeah. All right, give me a second. I keep having to move my little box around so I can see what's going on. Okay, here we go. All right. So this was the image that was given to you in the lecture, and this is the level that you're expected to try and remember and recall. So make sure this is in your notes and it's right there, easy to pull up. Okay, so language, perception, and touch are in the parietal. Your frontal lobe, as we said, executive function, thinking, behavior, planning, emotion, and movement. Deliberate movement anyway. The rest of your movement is taken care of with the cerebellum and the spinal and the brainstem. Occipital back here, vision and color identification. Okay. The cerebellum, coordination and balance, but also fine motor movement. Okay, so that's not mentioned on there, but learned fine motor movement like that of a very brilliantly trained pianist or what have you, that's the cerebellum, or a brilliantly trained dancer or a cellist or whatever, repeated motor movement. Heart rate and temperature and breathing, all the most basic animal stuff at the bottom of the brain. Okay, so if you think of the brainstem as the real animal side of things, so this is the stuff that just keeps you a breathing operational creature, right? There's no higher functions at all. It's just going to keep your heart going, keep your temperature sorted, make sure you breathe. That's it, right? So it's just keeping you a zombie. Everything else, the rest of the cortex, is what makes you a sort of functioning human being. Right? And the temporal lobes, the easy one to remember there is because you've done the hand thing. Hearing is a big one, right? You know that because you've put your hands over your ears when you're doing temporal lobes, okay? But hearing, memory, feeling, learning, right? So memory and learning go together, as you can imagine, yeah. And if you start having a look at what damage, one of the best ways to learn the lobes and the various areas of the cortex involved with the different emotions is to look at damage to them. So like do a bit of Google searching and go, okay, what happens if there is damage to the temporal lobe? How does that actually manifest in a patient? Yep. How often is everything there gone, and how often is one thing more than the other? Okay. Have a look up, out of interest, the good old frontal lobotomy from the good old days of science, when we used to rip out people's frontal lobes because they were very annoying and they didn't fit in with society, and what happened and what was their what was the effect on the patient. Really, really scary stuff, actually, what science got up to in the past, and possibly even now. Who knows? We won't know until we're older and wiser in the future. Okay, but get that image and make sure that it's sitting there in your notes for what to identify in terms of different cortical regions and what they process or deal with. Okay, I know that was a bit of a tricky one, but tricky ones are there for a reason. I kind of point you in the right direction for what you need to know. Okay. Now, this is, you know how I was just saying to you, it's a very broad overview and it's very kind of simplistic. This is where this happens and this is where that happens. So the gustatory cortex, for example, like where we actually experience taste and smell, and we integrate all that into how we understand food. There's actually a lot of different areas. Okay, so obviously taste and smell are both involved in food, but they both have separate regions, but they're both together, but they're not actually in any of those above lobes. They're actually in what we call the insular lobe, which is just under frontal and parietal. So you don't have to learn that. The only reason I'm saying it is that as you get further on, all of those brain regions are going to become more complex when it comes to what controls what. It's like, well, it's not just one area. It's, you know, everything is interconnected. So when it comes to things like, you know, gustation, eating, it's more than one region that's involved in making those decisions. Okay, now the next part is a labeling exercise, and I can guarantee you that it is a waste of my time and yours for me to sit here and let you fill out labels. You can do that from any textbook and any time. How are we in general with identifying the physical structures of the brain? Can anyone give me an idea where you are? Middling? Yep. This is a really common test and or exam question, right? Mainly because it is difficult. It does take a bit of knowledge to do. If I were you, I would tell myself some kind of narrative or story and have a definite direction that you move in every time when you're thinking about the brain. Some people will want to go from the cerebellum and move towards the left. Some people are going to want to go kind of more clockwise and go left to right. Whichever way you do it, my hint is do it the same way every time. Okay. Separate the brain stem and the diencephalon from the other areas as well, so that you've got an idea what you're talking about. So I've got a brainstem that's got these 3 distinct areas, and I need to know that. Then I've got this diencephalon, thalamus, hypothalamus, just behind it, pineal. That's a thing in and of itself. Then I've got this corpus callosum, which is easy identified, right? It's that nice big wiggly worm bit in the middle. It looks a little bit sort of fetal. What does the corpus callosum, what is it? What does it do? Anybody? No? It's what allows the hemispheres of the brain to communicate with each other. Okay, so corpus callosum is white matter. We always know that white matter is the axons of a neuron, yeah, whereas grey matter is the cell bodies. Yep, that should be hopefully there from last week. So the corpus callosum is literally the highway between the hemispheres so that your hemispheres can communicate. And it's all white matter. So it's all axons of neurons just shooting across between hemispheres, making sure that they can actually communicate with each other. Okay, but everything that's on that diagram right there, you are expected to know, with the possible exception of, see on the right-hand side there, it says the parieto-occipital sulcus. Great, that's its real name, but I'm pretty sure that you guys only need to know that the grooves are sulcus and the lumps are gyri. Yep, not necessarily the specific sulcus or the specific gyri. Okay, that's only called obviously the parieto-occipital because it's between the parietal and the occipital lobe, so it's not that difficult. But everything else there, cerebellum, ventricle, thalamus, hypothalamus, midbrain, pons, medulla, all of that needs to be known and known well. And I know it's really tricky because, again, if we could get you into labs a bit more often, we'd have you cutting open brains and being able to identify, sticking toothpicks in dead brains and putting labels on them, which is gross, but also useful because, you know, you do remember stuff when you stick a toothpick in a brain. Anywho, that's the deal of being a distance student. Amy.
I just wanted to add that I just find it a little bit tricky with the, like, knowing the names of all of the places depending on the picture, like just,
yes,
yeah, different ways they're presented. Like I probably find this one a little bit trickier to look at compared to other ones that are color coded and stuff.
I agree. And this is why it's one of the most frustrating things about learning any kind of medicine in any description. Every single textbook is different, and some people will love this one and some people will love that one. Some people hate the colors, some people love them. Like it's really a matter of figuring out what works for you, but remembering that in a test or an examination situation, it'll be black and white. That's what you're going to get in front of you. They're not going to give you all the colors. They're not going to give you the help. They're going to give you a fairly basic thing. So whatever it takes for you to get there, great, good, use it. But also remember that when you see it in a test, it will be different. So I guess my advice would be use a lot of different resources and kind of get across all of them. Because you just don't know what you're going to be confronted with. And you can't say, you can't use that in a test and go, oh, they didn't give me a colored one. Now I don't know anything. Well, you do. It's just not as easy. Yeah. I get you though. Like I prefer things to be nice and happily colored and make sense as well. They don't always though. Wait till you actually cut into real humans. They're just annoyingly not colored. Right? It's all just white stuff with pink everywhere. And you just go, yeah, we're not color coded down there either. So yeah, it's fun when you get to, is anyone here actually planning on going into surgical nursing at all? Any hands up?
Do we get to do wet labs at all, or?
Oh, I wish, Maddie. No,
we don't?
No, the answer is that CSU doesn't actually have a wet lab facility.
Okay.
Actually, not true. They do in the new medical campus on Orange, but that is not for the likes of us. Oh. That is only for the medical students. I'm sorry. I don't get to go in there either. I walked past the door and they waved it in front of my face and said, look, here's our wet lab. And I was like, oh, and they said, no, you can't. I was like, oh, dude, right. If they ask me to teach into medical science, then maybe, but at the moment I don't. I teach into nursing and paramed instead, so not for the likes of us. If you get a chance though, guys, if someone ever offers you the chance, then grab it with both hands, because it's really, really interesting. Super, super interesting. Okay, now labeling, we're not going to stick with that. Now, this is an important one. I'd land on this pretty heavily: the structure and the role of the ventricles within the brain. Right? We concentrate on cortexes and labeling and all sorts of things, but talking about the structure and the roles of these ventricles, in English, what does ventricle mean? What is a ventricle when it's at home?
It's the internal cavity.
Yeah, it's a hole. Yep. Okay, so all of these are holes, yes? And they've got different names, and you've got, if you were going to answer this properly, then you would say you would need to actually identify the different ventricles, all of those there, right? So a central canal going down, a lateral ventricle, third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, and fourth ventricle. What's annoying about this picture and the terminology? Where's the first and second ventricle? Why is the first time we use a number the third ventricle? Right? And the answer is because the two top ones, the lateral ventricles, they are the first and second. They're just lateral to each other. Okay? So first and second ventricles are up the top, but they're not called that. They're called lateral ventricles because they're next to each other. Then we go down to the third ventricle, which makes sense. But then we go to a cerebral aqueduct. Literally anything that goes down is the different terminology. Okay, an aqueduct where things flow. Fourth ventricle's right down there next to the cerebellum. Okay, and then we've got a central canal going into the brainstem itself and into the spinal cord. Okay, so that would be the structure of the ventricles. What are they there for? Right? Oh, that's talking about where they are. Right? What are the ventricles? What do they do? Apart from exist.
Hold cerebrospinal fluid.
Yep, that's it. Yep, and this is to do with making sure the pressure in the brain is correct, making sure that the brain is actually cushioned where it needs to be. All the important structures are not exposed and or squished and or bumped up and against each other. So ventricles are there literally the same way that water holds you up in a pool, to make sure that everything is exactly the right buoyancy for optimal function. Yep, that's the purpose. Okay. I think I should probably put this slideshow up for you guys as well, because it's got some nice answers on it. Okay, let's jump over here. Now, this should be easy, because you can do this with just one really good example, and just use the example of alcohol. Okay. So, because, you know, if you still don't drink, then you did once, at least once in your life, and you probably regretted it. So what is the significance of the blood-brain barrier? What's it supposed to keep out? What does it let in? Why is it there? What does it look like? And Natalie can't answer everything, so I'm not going to let her. Everyone's going to have to jump
Mel
in.
wants to answer this.
Thank you.
Mel?
It's from stop infections from going into the brain.
Excellent. Absolutely. How does it do that? Do you know, Mel? Does Emily know? I love the face. God, no. I don't know anything. Don't ask me. Don't be silly. You know you're on mute, but I'm loving the charades. It's good. I'm good. What she said.
Mel then. Oh, I must have accidentally pressed it. Anyway, I'm literally going through this part right now.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. It's fine. It's all good. All right. Let's talk about it briefly. Okay. So this is very much like when we talk about the urinary system, which we will get to. There are 3 really specific things that make sure that this particular kind of filtration system works. So again, the anatomy part of this is super important. Right. One is that we've got the endothelial cell. Okay, so the endothelium itself is very fenestrated, but it's very finely fenestrated. So there's very small areas that things can get through. We've got a basement membrane that again provides a second place where things cannot get through, or only certain things can get through. And then exactly the same as we have in the kidneys, we've actually got, so there they're called podocytes, here they're called astrocytes. Either way, we then have these specialized cells on the outside of that that have, for want of a better word, processes, sticky out bits. Those sticky out bits actually weave and form yet another really tight filtration layer. Okay, so all of these three layers stop one thing in particular getting into the brain. One thing we really don't want. What's right in the middle of that picture? Red blood cell? Yeah, the brain tissue is allergic to blood. It cannot have blood. Okay? You've got to keep the red blood cells out. Really, really important. Now, big things, it's easy to keep them out. Little things, little compounds, alcohol, very easy to get through. Nicotine, very easy to get through. Anesthetic, very easy to get through. But also we want to be small enough, this is why things get through. It's about molecular size. It's not really about selectivity. Okay, it has to be big enough to let through oxygen and let through in both directions carbon dioxide. Right? The brain must have oxygen. It means that anything that's as small as those molecules is also going to go through. Okay, so pretty important. So we want to, the function, the big one, as you said, is keeping toxins out. How good a job does the blood-brain barrier do at keeping toxins out? When was the last time that your brain successfully kept alcohol out of itself?
Yesterday, no.
Yes, and you lie. You lie. Okay, so it's to do with the molecule size. Okay, so the answer is it can keep some toxins out, and the biggie is blood, red blood cells. We don't want that, but if the molecule is small enough, it gets through. Okay, and this is something we need to be super, super aware of in practice, obviously, because anything that gets through to the brain is going to have a fairly large effect on the patient's affect at the time, as anybody would know if they've been under general anesthetic. Yeah, or anything that goes through. All right, please remember with the blood-brain barrier in particular, you need to mention those 3 layers of filtration and have those kind of glued into your brain. All right, the endothelial cells, the basement membrane, and the astrocyte that will actually wrap around and cause an extra filtration with the astrocyte processes. Okay, super, super important. Okay, now this is an easy one because you guys were all over this, so I reckon that you'll be all over it again. So we're going to just figure out which of these lists belongs to which nervous system. Okay, so you're going to have to, you can either say sympathetic and parasympathetic, or you can say pink for fight or flight and yellow for rest and digest, because this is what, the actual thing in your paper says highlight it. Pink and yellow for the different things. So increases alertness, which one?
The sympathetic.
Thank you. Increases heart rate.
Same again, sympathetic.
Thank you. Love it. And also good, right? Because most people go, oh, it must be different though, because it's the second one. Oh, it can't be the same. No, yeah. Okay. Constricts bronchial tubes to decrease the airflow in lungs.
Parasympathetic?
Yes, right, exactly. Why? Why would it do that? Why would we want to restrict airflow in our lungs or decrease airflow in our lungs? What?
Is that to relax, I guess, to relax? I don't know, actually.
Yeah, you're in exactly the right track. So it's less energy being used. You're only going to use it, and if you're resting and digesting, you're going to use it just enough. Yep, none of this, it's not deep breathing. We don't need to do opera arias right now. You know, I'm just resting. I don't need to do, like, think of yourself sleeping. Just going to breathe enough to keep myself alive, right? Whereas the breathing that I need to run away from the mastodon is somewhat more intense. Okay, so that number 4 would then be?
Sympathetic again.
Yep. When do we need nice, thick salivary mucus?
When we're eating, so would that be parasympathetic?
That would be parasympathetic, absolutely. When are you calm? Para? Got votes for para? Yep. When do we not care whether our skeletal muscles are working particularly well? Digestive system's all smooth, right? Like very few exceptions. It's all smooth muscle. It's all autonomic. So if we've got, where am I? Yeah, no effect on the blood vessels or skeletal muscles. Of course, we're resting. Yeah, our skeletal muscles aren't involved. We're just lying around. Think of yourself in a Roman toga lying on a chaise lounge and just eating grapes or something. It will help. Sweat glands, are they necessary for resting and digesting? Nope. Okay. Intestinal motility, is that important for resting and digesting? Right, that's parasympathetic. Oh, causes fight or flight response. No, I think we can skip that one. We said sweat glands. Now, no effect on the urinary bladder or internal sphincter. I did mention this before. So this one, that would be that your parasympathetic is the one that's going to attack on the urinary bladder and get rid of anything you're holding so you can run. Think of, again, the hangman's response. People tend to wet themselves when they're being hung. Okay. Stimulates the bladder wall to contract. That would be our parasympathetic. When do we need adrenaline? When we're running. Yep, parasympathetic. Causing resting and digest, whatever, that's a giveaway. Skeletal muscles and blood flow go up when we're resting and digesting or not?
Sympathetic.
No, yep, sympathetic. And intestinal motility, we don't need that going on when we're running away from things with teeth. So that would be parasympathetic, inhibition of intestinal motility. Okay, that was, I assume, easy. That one? Good. That, if nothing else, guys, that's an excellent, just a really, really good revision of, do I understand those systems? Yep, go through that list, make sure you can do it. All right. And I did it for you earlier, but you don't, we just did it. So there it is in pink and yellow, just like the exercise says. How jolly. Okay. Now, this is a big one. I want you to do this, not necessarily right this very second, because it's a draw thing. So I want you to take your time and actually do this. But draw or describe the pain pathway that was studied in this subject. Does anybody remember what that was from the lectures?
Was that the nail in the finger thing?
Yeah, that's right. So you need to be able to draw that pathway and or describe it. If you're not much of a drawer, that's fine. Just do it like a little box diagram or whatever. But it says include the neuron chain right from the nociceptor right to the cerebral cortex. So it wants all of the detail on this slide from your lecture. So literally everything needs to be included in that. Make sure that you have that all sorted out. So you've got your stimulus, you've got your pain receptor, right? You've got your peripheral nerve and the afferent pain fiber. So it's just telling your story. I know where the message is going, right? It's going through the dorsal root ganglion because we are talking about sensory nerves, going through the dorsal root, synapsing in the spinal cord, going through that lateral spinothalamic tract, up through the reticular formation to the limbic system, hypothalamus and thalamus, they're both involved, and eventually from there to the somatosensory cortex in the parietal lobe, which is going to be in control of where is the pain and what am I going to do about it. Okay. I know there's a lot of steps, but you've got to use it, follow it like a story. Right? Every little thing involved, every part of that circuit, you need to be able to talk about and where it goes. Right? So I thought I'd provide it for you rather than make you do it this evening, because you can do that anytime. Use as many colors as you want, Amy. Plenty. All the colors. Please use the colors. It's a good thing. I did. When I was studying, everything had that many colors, you wouldn't believe it. It looked a little bit like a meth head's dream. Yes, Amy.
I just didn't really get the number 6 lateral, whatever that says.
Oh, that's literally just talking about the most important part there is you've got 2 spinal tracts, afferent and efferent, one taking the sensory and one taking the motor back out. So that's all it's talking about. The laterospinothalamic tract is where your sensory nerves are going.
Okay.
Yep, that's it. And even if you didn't use that particular word and just said sensory tract, that would be fine. That would be enough. Yep. All right, cool. Let's keep moving because we're actually using up our entire time tonight. Amazing. Okay. Ooh, the vestibular apparatus. This is back to our ears again and all that stuff. Oh, scary. Okay. The utricle and the saccule, 2 membraney kind of sacs located in an area called the something. I'm going to throw that over to you. I can spin effects across the desert. All right, that's all right. No, we'll go. We'll move. Does anyone remember what the crystals are called that are embedded in the gelatinous membrane? They've got a kind of cool name. And they're easy to remember because they include the word lith. Someone remember what they're called? Does the word ostolith ring a bell? No? Okay. Let's do some. Hey?
I had it in my notes.
Yeah. Can I see this slide here? This is really important.
I was looking for it. What was I looking for?
Okay. Yeah. So let's make sure that when we have a look at this, you know exactly how to answer this. Okay. So take a screenshot for the moment. Okay. Because you do need to know, this is exactly the level that you need to know about the vestibular apparatus. All right. We need to know where they are, what the crystals are called, what their hair cells bend in response to, and we've already actually answered the last bit, how many semicircular canals there are and what those hair cells bend in response to. Okay, this is my serious face. Know this one. Okies? All right. I won't torture you though, because I don't have to pull it out. It's like pulling teeth. I don't want to do that. I would like to direct you to this as part of your study for the next test though, please. Okay. Anyway, answers, not that we're important. Membranous labyrinths, otoliths, gravity, angular acceleration, and inertia of the fluid. Anyway, that's it. Okay. You can go back and study that bit for yourself. And I don't believe that's got anything to do with it. No, that would have to be to do with last week. So we don't need to worry about that. Okay. Now, we've used up the entire hour, basically. I haven't been keeping up with the chat, and I'm sorry, because I can't do everything at once. Is there anything, has anyone been reading the chat? Is there anything I should be aware of? No, just people answering questions. Thank you for those that are answering questions in typing and I'm not seeing it. That's really annoying. From my point of view, no, you're not annoying. Thank you for answering the questions. I'm just sorry I didn't see them all at the time. Okay. All right. Do you have a good idea of where you need to focus for the next mini test?
Yes.
Good. Are there any worries or concerns that you want to have me address before we sort off for the evening? No.
to-
I reckon it sounds to me like you're all pretty good on brain and sympathetic, parasympathetic, all that kind of thing, but that probably nearly everybody's pretty weak on the senses, on hearing and sight and balance and what have you. So maybe that's the area to focus in on and make sure that you remember. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let us depart and eat food so that our brains actually do continue. And I will see you guys same bat time, same bat channel next week.
Bye.
Cool.
Thank you.
No worries. See you soon.
Bye.